Amina and Tunde's story began like many young love stories in Lagos, under the heat of the African sun and amidst the rhythm of the city's ever-buzzing streets. They were young, hopeful, and convinced that love could conquer anything. Their first meeting had been at a mutual friend's party, an evening of laughter, music, and the bright glow of the city lights. Amina had never been the type to fall head over heels, but Tunde had a way of looking at her that made her feel as though she were the only person in the room. They had shared a quiet, meaningful conversation by the balcony, where the breeze carried the sweet scent of jasmine from the street below. There was something about him, his confidence, his smile, that made her feel safe. Tunde, a man of modest means, worked as a junior architect in a small firm. He was quiet yet passionate, with a dream of someday building his own business and creating things that would leave a mark on the city. Amina, on the other hand, was a young woman full of ambition and fire. She had recently graduated from a fashion design school and had big plans to launch her own line, even if it meant starting small. Their differences seemed to complement each other perfectly. She admired his work ethic, his quiet ambition, and the way he always seemed to have a plan for the future. He, in turn, was captivated by her energy, her creativity, and the way she made him feel as if anything was possible. For the first few months, their relationship was full of laughter and long walks through the streets of Lagos, hand in hand. Their weekends were spent exploring local markets, tasting street food, and attending art galleries. They would talk for hours about their hopes, their dreams, and the places they wanted to visit. Amina loved how Tunde listened to her, how he always made her feel heard. He was supportive, attending her fashion shows and cheering her on, even when the crowds were small and the critics quiet. But as time passed, the cracks began to show. At first, it was small things, Amina's late-night design sessions interrupted by Tunde's complaints about her busy schedule, and his long hours at work leaving him drained and irritable. Amina found herself frustrated by his inability to understand the demands of her work. Tunde's frustrations, in turn, grew as he watched her dreams soar while his own were taking longer to materialize. The gap between their worlds began to feel wider. The tension came to a head one evening, just as the rainy season began to settle in over the city. Amina had just come back from a fashion event that had gone well, and she was brimming with excitement. Tunde, however, had spent the day in a tense meeting with his boss, who had yet to give him the promotion he had worked for. He felt overlooked, stuck in a job that didn't fulfill him. And instead of the comforting smile he usually offered Amina, he greeted her with a cold silence. "What's wrong?" Amina asked, sensing the shift in his mood. "Nothing," Tunde replied, his voice curt. Amina frowned. She could feel the distance between them growing. "Tunde, we can talk about it. What's bothering you?" he snapped, his frustration spilling over. "You don't get it, Amina. You're out there, living your dream, while I'm stuck in the same place day after day. I'm doing everything I can, but it's never enough. And you don't even see it." Amina recoiled, stung by the accusation. She had always supported him, believed in his potential. But now, for the first time, she realized just how much their differing ambitions were pulling them apart. "Tunde, that's not fair. I'm not asking you to do anything different. I just want you to be happy with where you are. We're in this together," she said, but her words sounded empty to her own ears. It was as if the space between them had become too vast to bridge with words. He shook his head, his voice rising. "You don't understand. You're so consumed by your success that you don't notice me. You don't notice how hard this is for me." Amina's heart tightened. She had always thought of them as a team, as a unit that would grow together. But now, it felt like he was blaming her for his own dissatisfaction. "I'm not asking you to give up your dreams, Tunde," Amina whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I can't keep waiting for you to see mine." The argument stretched on, a back and forth of hurt feelings and unmet expectations. Finally, exhausted, Amina stood up and wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Maybe we need some time apart," she said, her voice steady but broken. Tunde froze, looking at her with wide, desperate eyes. "No, Amina. Please, we can work through this. I love you." She shook her head. I don't know if I can do this anymore. And just like that, in a flash of raw emotion, their love story came to an end. Amina walked out of their shared apartment that night, her heart heavy and her mind clouded with doubt. She didn't know if she was making the right decision, but she knew she had to follow her own path. The next few months passed in a blur, filled with late nights working and avoiding the painful memory of what once was. She refused to look back. Tunde, on the other hand, spiraled into bitterness. He was left with nothing but the memories of a love that had slipped through his fingers, and the feeling that Amina had abandoned him for her dreams. He tried to move on, but the pain never really left. They went their separate ways, both of them convinced they were better off alone, but neither truly free of each other's ghosts. The months following Amina and Tunde's breakup were a blur of sleepless nights and emotional numbness. In the aftermath, Amina threw herself into her work. Fashion design was her escape, her sanctuary, and as time went on, she found herself increasingly enveloped in her creative pursuits. The sting of the breakup, though still fresh, began to fade as she focused on building a future that didn't include Tunde. Her life was consumed by late-night sketching sessions, frantic meetings with suppliers, and the chaotic rush of putting together new collections. Slowly but surely, her name began to appear on the radar of Lagos' fashion scene. People were noticing her designs, vibrant, modern takes on traditional African prints, and soon, Amina was invited to showcase her work at high-profile events. She had found success, but even amidst the excitement, a hollow feeling lingered. Despite everything, a part of her still missed the connection she had once shared with Tunde. She hadn't wanted to end their relationship, but deep down, she knew that it had become something neither of them could fix. And then, one afternoon, everything changed. Amina met Daniel. It wasn't love at first sight, but something about him drew her in. Daniel was a man of few words, with a quiet confidence that was immediately apparent. He was a police officer, tall, broad-shouldered, and disciplined, with an air of steadiness about him that Amina found comforting. They met at an industry event, a charity gala for underprivileged youth. Amina had been invited to showcase her work, and Daniel was there representing the police force as a guest of honor. They struck up a conversation by the dessert table, where Amina had just grabbed a glass of champagne, and Daniel was eyeing the assortment of pastries. "You're not supposed to eat those, you know," Daniel said with a smile, his eyes lighting up with humor. "A charity event, and you're going straight for the dessert table?" Amina laughed, her hand reflexively going to her stomach as if to defend herself. "I've earned this one," she replied, her voice teasing. Their conversation flowed easily from there, moving from light-hearted banter to deeper topics, everything from childhood memories to their ambitions for the future. Amina found herself fascinated by Daniel's sense of purpose. Unlike Tunde, who had always been consumed with proving himself, Daniel was grounded. He knew who he was and didn't feel the need to compete. He wasn't just about the job or his uniform. He cared about the people around him. His sense of duty wasn't just a profession, it was part of his very character. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel offered to drive her home, and they exchanged numbers. Amina hesitated for a moment. She wasn't ready to jump into another relationship, especially after the emotional wreckage left by her breakup with Tunde. But there was something about Daniel's steady, calm presence that made her want to take a chance. They started seeing each other casually at first. Dinner dates, quiet walks around the city, and deep conversations late into the night. Daniel was a man who took things slow. He never rushed her, never pressured her. He listened when she spoke, and unlike Tunde, he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. He wasn't intimidated by her career or her success. If anything, he admired her drive. Slowly but surely, she found herself letting go of the past, of the memories of Tunde that still haunted her dreams. In Daniel, she saw someone who didn't need to change her but complemented her, offering a sense of peace and stability that she had longed for. Within a few months, Daniel asked her to be his girlfriend, and Amina didn't hesitate. He was different from Tunde, different from anyone she had ever been with. They fit together in a way she hadn't thought was possible. She could imagine a future with him. A future where love wasn't just about passion and fire, but about partnership and trust. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Daniel was affectionate, kind, and patient. Amina reveled in his attention, and in return, she supported him as he dealt with the stress of his job. The nature of his work meant long hours and unpredictable shifts, but Amina understood. She respected his commitment to the city, to his work, and to helping people. He was her rock, the steady presence she had been missing in her life. Within a year of meeting, they were engaged. Amina was shocked at how quickly things had moved, but she never doubted her feelings for him. It felt right. The proposal had been simple yet heartfelt, just the two of them on a quiet evening, sitting by the lake in a park near his apartment. He had looked at her with those steady brown eyes and asked, "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she had whispered, the word almost escaping her lips before he had even finished asking. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just the warmth of love that had bloomed between them. Their wedding was a modest affair, but it was beautiful. Amina wore a dress she had designed herself, a stunning fusion of traditional and modern, and Daniel stood by her side, his uniform crisp and perfect, his smile wide. There were no extravagant celebrations or large crowds, just the people who mattered most to them, a few close friends, family, and colleagues. Married life started smoothly. They settled into a small but cozy apartment in the heart of the city. Amina continued her work, launching new collections, and Daniel focused on his police career. They supported each other in every way possible, with Daniel always there for Amina when she needed him, and Amina offering comfort and encouragement when Daniel came home after long days spent dealing with crime and tragedy. Their relationship was a balance of love, respect, and mutual understanding, and Amina found herself happier than she had ever been before. Yet, despite the joy she felt with Daniel, a small part of her remained tethered to the past. Every now and then, the memory of Tunde would creep into her mind, those early days of passion, the spark they had once shared. But she had made her choice. She was married now, building a life with Daniel. Tunde was a distant memory, one she had hoped to leave behind forever. Amina had always found peace in the rhythm of her life with Daniel, a routine that provided stability and comfort. But as the days went by, a shadow from her past began to creep into their world. It started innocently, a mysterious email containing explicit photos from her previous relationship with Tunde, her former lover. The sender, masked in anonymity, demanded money in exchange for keeping the images from Daniel. For Amina, the fear of these photos being exposed to her husband was overwhelming. The images, reminders of a past she had long since moved on from, had the potential to destroy everything she had built with Daniel. The blackmailer's demands grew more insistent, and Amina was consumed with anxiety. She couldn't focus on her work, couldn't enjoy her time with Daniel, and every message from the blackmailer felt like a tightening noose around her. Daniel, ever perceptive, noticed the change in Amina. He could see the strain in her eyes, the way she jumped at the sound of a message notification, and the way she withdrew from him. But Amina kept her secret, unwilling to burden him with the truth. She told herself it was for his own good, that she was protecting him by keeping him in the dark. But as the blackmailer's demands grew more severe, the pressure became unbearable. The breaking point came one evening when the blackmailer sent a new set of photos. Amina, desperate and terrified, finally broke down. When Daniel came home, exhausted from his day, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Amina's tired eyes, her refusal to eat, and her anxious behavior made it clear to him that something was off. He sat beside her, asking gently but firmly, "Amina, what's going on? Talk to me." And for the first time, Amina couldn't hold the secret anymore. She confessed everything, the blackmail, the photos, and the shame she felt. Daniel listened intently, his face unreadable, before standing and walking toward the window. The silence stretched between them, and Amina's heart raced as she waited for his reaction. Would he be angry? Would he blame her? After a moment, Daniel turned back to face her, his expression calm but resolute. "I'm going to handle this," he said, his voice firm. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I'll find out who this is and make sure they never bother you again." Amina, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, tried to protest, but Daniel stopped her. "Don't worry. Just trust me." In that moment, Amina realized that the man she had married wasn't just a loving husband. He was someone who would protect her, no matter the cost. She had feared that her past would tear them apart, but Daniel's response showed her that their bond was stronger than anything that could threaten them. Amina didn't need to carry the burden alone anymore. Daniel's unwavering support made her realize that, even in the face of her darkest fears, she wasn't alone. Together, they would face the shadows from her past, and she knew, with him by her side, they would emerge stronger. The night after Amina's confession, Daniel couldn't sleep. His mind raced, his thoughts circling back to what his wife had revealed to him. He had always known there was a certain vulnerability to Amina, a guardedness in her eyes that hinted at something more than the successful, confident woman she appeared to be. But hearing the details of her past, how she had trusted someone who now used that trust to threaten her, it sent a deep wave of protectiveness through him. He sat up in bed, staring into the darkness of their apartment. The weight of the situation felt enormous. Someone had pictures of Amina, pictures she had shared with an ex-boyfriend, and now that person was demanding money to keep them from being exposed. And worse, they had threatened to destroy her marriage if Amina didn't comply. The more Daniel thought about it, the angrier he became. No one had the right to treat his wife this way. But Daniel knew that anger alone wouldn't solve the problem. He had spent enough time on the streets as a police officer to understand that emotions could cloud judgment. He needed a plan. The first step was obvious. He had to track down the person behind the blackmail. The next morning, Daniel left for work earlier than usual. Amina was still asleep, her face pale and tense from the anxiety of the night before. He kissed her gently on the forehead and promised to take care of everything, but deep down, Daniel knew this was not something he could do alone. He arrived at the police station and went straight to his superior, Officer Okoye, a no-nonsense veteran of the force who had earned Daniel's respect over the years. After briefing Okoye on the situation, without revealing too many personal details, Daniel explained his plan. He needed to trace the blackmailer's emails, uncover their identity, and take action. Okoye immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Blackmail is serious," Okoye said as he tapped his fingers on the desk, his expression grave. "But if we can find out where these emails are coming from, we can start working on this. You know the drill, Daniel. We'll need to get the right people involved." Daniel nodded. He wasn't going to let this slide. He knew Amina needed him, and he wasn't going to let some coward prey on her fears. This was no longer just about protecting his wife. It was about stopping someone who had crossed a line that no one should be allowed to cross. Over the next few days, Daniel worked tirelessly with his colleagues to track the origins of the blackmail messages. They discovered that the emails were being sent from an anonymous email address, one that had been created with false details. But they didn't stop there. Using the resources of the police force, they were able to trace the email's IP address back to a location in Lagos, an address that Daniel recognized immediately. It was an apartment building in a district that was known for its shady characters. Daniel's stomach churned. He had no doubt that the person behind this blackmail had a connection to someone from Amina's past, someone who had been close to her at one point and had now turned into something else entirely. As Daniel and his team pieced together the details, a pattern began to emerge. The blackmailer wasn't just after money. There was something more personal, something darker, driving their actions. The sense of betrayal Amina had felt when she first received the photos was now amplified by the realization that this person wasn't acting alone. The blackmailer was being manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit her vulnerabilities. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He found Amina sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone in a daze. She hadn't been able to reach him all day, and the silence had left her uneasy. Her heart had been pounding with fear as each hour passed without hearing from him. Was he upset with her? Did he regret marrying her after learning about her past? "Hey," Daniel said, his voice soft, but there was a new edge to it. "We need to talk." Amina looked up at him, her eyes full of questions. Her heart skipped a beat at the seriousness of his tone. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've tracked down the person who's been blackmailing you," Daniel said, sitting down next to her. His expression was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes, determination mixed with a quiet rage. "And I think I know who they're working with." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe it. She had feared the worst, but hearing Daniel say that someone was actually behind this, someone who had been working in the shadows, made her stomach twist with dread. "Who is it?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Daniel took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "It's Tunde." Amina's face strained of color. Tunde. Her ex-boyfriend, the one she had hoped she would never hear from again. She thought their chapter was closed, but now it seemed as though he had come back into her life in the worst way possible. "I should have known," Amina murmured, her hands shaking. "But why would he do this? After everything? We haven't even spoken in over a year." Daniel looked at her, his expression hardening. "He's angry, Amina. He's bitter about how things ended between you. And now he's using that bitterness to hurt you, using the photos to try and get money and control. He's been working with someone who's been guiding him through this." Amina's mind was reeling. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But why now? Why come after me now? I'm married. I have a life. Why drag all of this up again?" Daniel shook his head. "Some people don't know how to let go, Amina. And Tunde. He's one of those people. He's been watching you, waiting for the right moment." The weight of the situation settled heavily on Amina's shoulders. She felt like she was suffocating under the pressure. Tunde had always been unpredictable, but this was something else entirely. And the fact that he had involved someone else, someone who had been able to track her, to manipulate her in this way, it left her feeling violated in a way she hadn't anticipated. Daniel took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. "Don't worry, Amina. We're going to handle this together." In the days that followed, Daniel continued his investigation, working with the police to build a case against Tunde and anyone who had helped him. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the truth became. It wasn't just Tunde's jealousy driving him. It was something darker, a need for power over Amina, to make her feel as small and insignificant as he did when they broke up. But the pieces were slowly falling into place. And soon, Daniel would be ready to make his move. After discovering Tunde's involvement in blackmailing Amina, Daniel worked tirelessly to uncover his motives and gather evidence. Tunde, unable to let go of his toxic past with Amina, sought control and revenge, fueled by a shadowy accomplice. The police traced the blackmail to Tunde's hideout, and Daniel devised a sting operation to capture him. Despite her fear, Amina trusted Daniel. During the operation, Tunde was arrested at a cafe with undeniable evidence of his crimes. While the ordeal ended the immediate threat, it left emotional scars on Amina and tension in her marriage. Back home, Daniel reassured Amina that their love and commitment would help them overcome the past. Together, they closed the door on their darkest chapter, ready to rebuild their future as a united pair.